people of Konedobu called it the Watcher. It wasn't a particularly remarkable rock, just a giant, weathered hulk of gray stone that sat on the grassy slope, overlooking the chaotic, vibrant sprawl of Port Moresby. It was simply there, a permanent feature of the landscape, as old as the hills themselves. Children played on it. Lovers carved their initials into its base, and old men sat in its shadow, sharing stories. But everyone knew the one story, the true story, that set the Watcher apart. It began in the 1970s, during a time of urban expansion. The city planners wanted to beautify Ella Beach, to create a picturesque waterfront for the growing capital. They saw the Watcher, a massive, aesthetically pleasing stone, and decided it would be the perfect centerpiece. Old Man Arrow was the only one who protested. His grandfather had told him the rock was not of the land, but on the land, that it had its own will. "You do not move a Watcher," he warned, his voice a dry rustle. "It sees. It knows its place." The engineers, men with blueprints and bulldozers, just laughed. They were masters of concrete and steel. What was one old rock? The day they came for it was a spectacle. A massive crawler crane, its metal tracks chewing up the earth, was positioned beside the Watcher. Thick steel cables, as strong as pythons, were wrapped around its girth. The engine roared, the cable groaned and tightened, and with a deep, grating sound that seemed to shake the very bones of the earth, the Watcher was lifted from its resting place. A collective gasp went through the crowd. For the first time in living memory, the slope looked naked, wrong. A pale, dusty scar was all that remained. The journey down to Ella Beach was triumphant for the city officials. They installed the Watcher with great ceremony near the water's edge, a new sentinel for the sea. Photographs were taken. Speeches were made. They had tamed a piece of the wild landscape. Old Man Arrow just shook his head and waited. The first sign was the dogs. On the second night, every dog in Konedobu began to howl, a chorus of misery aimed at the empty space on the hill. They wouldn't stop until dawn. Then, the children started having bad dreams. They spoke of a heavy shadow wandering, lost and angry, looking for its home. A week after the move, a fisherman, heading out before first light, noticed something strange. The air around the rock at Ella Beach was cold, unnaturally so, and the sea around it was perfectly still like oil, while the rest of the water gently lapped at the shore. He hurried away, a primal fear chilling him more than the air. The next morning, the Watcher was gone. Not stolen, not broken. Gone. The spot where it had been placed at Ella Beach was empty, save for a deep, dry impression in the sand. Panic and confusion rippled through the city. Who would steal a multi-ton rock? And how? The mystery deepened when a boy from Konedobu came running down the hill, his eyes wide with terror. He was breathless, pointing back the way he came. There, on the grassy slope, sitting squarely in its ancient, weathered depression, was the Watcher. It was back, impossibly. There were no tire tracks leading up the steep incline, no signs of a crane, no evidence of any human effort. It was as if the rock had simply dissolved from the beach and reformed on the hill overnight. The city officials were baffled, then angry. It had to be a prank. a complex and absurd act of defiance. They vowed to do it again. The second moving was a more somber affair. The crane operators were nervous, crossing themselves before starting the engines. This time, they took the Watcher much further, dumping it not at the scenic beach, but into the deep waters of the Fairfax harbor. They watched it sink, a cloud of bubbles rising as it disappeared into the dark, murky depths. "Let's see it come back from there," one of them muttered, trying to sound confident. That night, Port Moresby was struck by a storm that came from nowhere. The wind didn't howl, it screamed, a sound of pure fury. People swore they heard something else in the chaos, a deep, grinding rumble, like stone dragging against stone, moving through the streets. The rain fell in horizontal sheets, and the sea was a churning maelstrom. In the calm of the morning, the city surveyed the damage. And there, on the slope in Konedobu, clean and dry, as if the storm had never touched it, was the Watcher. A terrible understanding dawned on everyone. This was not a prank. This was something else, something ancient and powerful that defied their logic. The rock was not just a rock. It was a place, a being, a fixed point in the world that could not be moved. They never tried to move it again. To this day, the Watcher sits on its slope, a silent, brooding presence. The people of Konedobu give it a respectful distance. They no longer carve their names into it. The children are warned not to play on it after dark, because sometimes, on still, quiet nights when the moon is hidden, if you stand very close and place your hand upon its sun-warmed surface, you can feel a faint, deep, rhythmic vibration. It's not the hum of the city or the tremor of a truck. It is slow and deliberate, like a heartbeat. And if you listen with more than your ears, you might just hear the faint, gritty whisper of stone settling, the sound of something that is not just back in its place, but is eternally, watchfully, alive in it. They took it to the sea, but the sea, it seems, knew better than to keep it. And so, it always comes home.